What is up guys, how are you all doing? My name is Keenan and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to get a MoodyGrams feature. I'm going to be showing you the exact steps I did to get from this completely raw photo to this crazy sunset that MoodyGrams chose. If you do like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe because I'm going to be doing a lot more tutorials and videos and stuff and posting more photos on Instagram. So yeah, follow me on Instagram at keenanland.com. Let's go into Lightroom and I'll show you guys how it's done. So guys, I have just imported my photo into Lightroom and this is the raw image as you can see here. And if I go left, you can see that this is the final image. So what I first like to do before I edit any picture is I crop the image. Instagram's portrait crop is the aspect ratio of 4:5 as you can see here. So I click on 4:5 and what you can see here, it does a 4:5 like landscape crop, and to change that into portrait you hit the simple X key on your keyboard and it makes it portrait. And for this, for the purpose of this video, I'm not going to move it around, just going to keep it simple and crop it dead in the center. Okay, next up I changed the white balance, and because it looks pretty cold right now, what I'm going to do is change the white balance to make it look warmer. That's basically what white balance does. It can make your photo look colder or warmer. So if you move it over to the left, it goes very, very blue, very, very cold. And move it over, all the way over to the right, it becomes very, very orange and very, very warm. And for this picture, I went down to about 7,020, I think. But, around here, so I'm going to keep it at 7,075. Next up, we'll be working with the tint. And the tint just gives the whole picture either like a green or a pink kind of tint. So, just to make this photo a bit more pink and a bit more warm, because that's what my photo looked like, I had it at about +20. So let's leave it at 20. So as you can see, this photo is a bit underexposed. So to brighten it, I just changed the exposure. Exposure basically treats the whole image as equal, so every single color is brought up by the same amount. So I brought it up to about +20, 0.2, sorry, +0.2, just to bring it ever so slightly up. I usually don't work with contrast until the end, but for the purpose of this video I will do it for you guys. Contrast basically makes the darker parts of the photo darker and the brighter parts a bit brighter. So I made it up to about +44 in my photo, and as you can see, that makes this bit here a lot darker and a bit here a lot brighter. Next we're going to work with the highlights, shadows, whites and blacks. Working with the highlights basically affects the brightest parts of the image. So as you can see, the sky is the brightest part of the image, so if I bring the highlights all the way up, it makes it very, very bright, and the highlights down makes it very, very dark. Well, darker. So what I did was brought the highlights down all the way to -100. This was because I could get the detail in the clouds, and you can see this, it's got a bit of texture in there, makes the photo look a lot nicer. To counteract the highlights, because I made the highlights darker, I kind of wanted to make the whole image slightly brighter, so I can work with the whites, and whites just basically makes all the brighter parts of the image brighter. So I brought the whites to about 13, and that just allowed me to, make the brighter parts up here a bit brighter. Then I wanted to work with shadows a bit. Shadows brings up the darkest parts of the image, the complete opposite to highlights really. So if you bring it all the way up, you can see Luke's body here is a lot brighter, the trees, you can see them. If I brought them all the way down, they become completely black. So I brought the shadows up to about 39, 40. So I'll bring it up, you can see that now we can see Luke's body a bit better. And the trees are coming up with just a slight bit of detail. This first bit, the basic stuff, is just to make the image a bit nicer and a bit easier to work with. After that, I'm just messing around with the blacks, and because I made this photo quite a contrasty image, very moody, I brought down the blacks to about -62. So yeah, it is quite dark at the moment and very, very contrasty, but that could be fixed later on. So with this photo, I did mess with the saturation and vibrance just a tiny bit. So what I did was I brought the clarity up a bit, and clarity just, adds a bit more detail to the whole image. Vibrance, I'm just going to bring up to about 10. Same with saturation, just to make the whole image a bit more saturated. Okay, next guys, we want to work with the tone curve, and a tone curve is basically the basic stuff, but in the form of a curve. And what I kind of like to do is kind of work and tweak on what I did in the basic section to make the photo a bit nicer. So what I did was added a bit of fade, and to add some fade, you bring down this bottom point and you bring it up like this. So you can see like a little horizontal line here, and that kind of gives the fade. And what I did was I brought it up to about here. I'm not really sure like the values of the tone curve, I just say here and stuff. As you can see, the whole thing is faded now nicely, but parts of the image are a bit too contrasted and it's not looking too great. So what I did was brought down this point here to about the line, to meet this dotted line here, just to bring down the whole image slightly. And then I got the point in the middle of those two. At the end, I brought it up a bit. So as you can see, this brings up the sky and the sea just a bit, just to, you know, add a bit more contrast to the image basically. And I didn't want the whites to be too overexposed, so what I did was just bring this point down slowly. So this kind of adds a bit of fade to the sky. So guys, next we move on to the hue, saturation and luminance tab, and this is where all your color correction just takes place. You can change the colors, you can just do everything. It is a bit mad. So here, as you can see, I'm just showing an example. If I move the red tab all the way over, you can see all the reds in the image move closer to the red side, so they become a deeper red. But if I move them over, they turn more of an orange. As you can see, this side a bit more orange and this side a bit more red. So what I did with this one, I made the reds a bit more red basically. So I moved them over to about -14, -15, around that. After that, I moved to the orange tab, and I wanted the photo to be a bit more red and a bit more warmer and sunsetty. So if you push it all the way over, you can see it turns a bit pink, which is not what I exactly wanted. I moved the orange to about -17. Same with the yellows, I moved that down to about -12. And essentially this is making the whole photo a lot more orange and red. There wasn't very many greens in the image, so what I wanted to do was just push them all the way over, just in case there was like very small amounts of bokeh here. I don't actually know how to pronounce it, but B-O-K-E-H, you get me. I pushed them over to like about 86. And with the aquas, I moved that down to about -40. Now this doesn't really affect much of the image, but if you can see this little bit here, if I move the aquas over, it does change color very, very slightly. So I moved this down to about -40, just to give the photo a bit more pop in this little blurred out region. I left the blue and purples mainly because that kind of just made these buildings here a bit too aqua or purple, and it didn't look right. And with the magentas, I just moved them over to about 20, just to give it a bit more purple in the image. So as you can see, this photo is looking pretty good. And what I noticed was Luke's back here is a bit too underexposed. So what I did was added a small radial filter here. I just dragged out and I selected invert mask because now it affects everything inside. And you can see if I bring it up, that's what it looks like. And I didn't want it too much. I just wanted to be able to see a bit more detail in his back. Brought up the exposure to about 0.8. And I brought the contrast up to about 12, just to make it look a bit more natural. Okay, so now we move on to the saturation tab, and this is where you can increase the saturation or decrease the saturation of your image. Surprise, surprise. Here is where the colors start to pop. I moved the saturation tab of the reds about to about 30. And same with the oranges, I'm gonna bring them up as well. So as you can see, that just, whoa, look at that. Making the sky very, very orange. So I moved that up to about 37. Same with the yellows, just bring the yellows up, make it a bit more saturated. You can't really tell the difference, but if you look at the sky up here, it does give it a bit of saturation. What I wanted to do was still allow the sky to be a bit lighter at the top, because I didn't want it to look completely orange and a bit bland. So I moved that up to about 9. With the greens, as I said, there wasn't very many greens, so I just literally just pushed it all the way basically to the top, just to bring out the trees here that you can't really tell, but it just adds to the image a bit. Aqua, completely left it because it really did not change much apart from that little dude there. Didn't really do much. But the blues I did actually change. I moved it up to about 38, but I think, yeah, I'll leave it at 38, it's pretty good. And with the purples and magentas, instead of bringing them all the way up, because I didn't want these buildings looking too disgusting, so I moved them down to about -40 for the purples, if I can get there. And with the magentas, I moved them down to just about -20. And this was just so that the buildings don't go purple, because I quite like them, the kind of faded blue that they are now. Now we work on the luminance, and the luminance just basically alters the brightness for each color that is targeted. So if you bring it up, if you bring the reds up, you can tell that all the reds in the image are made brighter. Bring them down, all the reds in the image are made darker. And with the luminance tab, you really don't want to do too much with it. So for me, I just brought the reds up to about +25. And what you notice if you bring the luminance up too much is that you do get these little blotches of color which aren't affected, and it looks just a bit weird. So yeah, I'm going to bring it up to about 25. And with the oranges, I'm just going to bring that up to about 11. The photo is looking pretty good. Here we're going to move on to the split tone, and what I like doing with the split toning is adding a bit of blue to the photo. So if you just go around here, if you add a bit of blue, it makes the sky a bit more purple. But if you add it to the shadows as well, it makes the shadows a bit more blue and it cools it down. So it kind of balances the whole image out, which I quite like. So with the blue hues for the highlights, I moved it up to about 242, and I moved the saturation up to about 15. So if I just turn it off and turn it back on again, you can tell that the highlights around here go a bit more bluey purple, and it gives it a bit of a warmer feel. Same with the shadows, I brought this up to about 238, and you can see if I do that, it kind of adds a blue hue to the shadows, gives it a bit of a, you know, more of a balanced out effect, cools it down very, very slightly, and just makes it look quite nice. And you know, I put the saturation up to about 6. So next guys, we're going to move on to the sharpening noise reduction tab, and by default my Lightroom has set to a tiny bit of sharpening already, so I'm just going to leave that tab. I'm going to add a bit of noise reduction because this photo was taken in the evening, so there is a chance that there would be a bit more noise. So what I do, I just brought up the noise reduction to about 10 to smooth out the whole image. Brought the detail down just a very, very slight amount, just to even out the whole thing. I did add a bit of distortion to the photo, and this is because I felt that Luke was taking a bit too much of the frame. So if I add a tiny bit of distortion, it brings him out a bit more, away from the camera. That's what it looks like. So I turn it off and I turn it back on. He goes a bit further away from the photo, the frame, a bit smaller, and it shows a bit more in the photo. I don't usually like to add vignetting in my photos. For the purpose of this video, I wanted to make the sky just a tiny bit darker, so I brought them down to about -20. Okay, and what I love doing, what I love doing is adding a bit of grain to my photos. So if we whip the grain all the way up, you can see it looks like an old film photo that was just very, very badly processed. So I whipped the grain up to about 25. I think, you know what, I'm gonna move that down to 20. I'm gonna move the grain down to about 20. And as you can see in his head, it's got a bit of grain. It does look like it's a kind of, it looks like it's a physical photo that you could hold, basically, which I quite like. I also just changed the size and the roughness down just a very, very small amount so it doesn't look too overboard. Then you want to dehaze the batch. So dehaze basically adds more contrast and saturation. So as you can see, when I've moved it all the way up, it's got like this weird blue effect, but it's super contrasty. Looks a bit weird, but it also looks kind of cool at the same time. But I added a bit of dehaze, just a tiny bit, because I didn't want the buildings over here to look too purple. Just added about 9 on there. Not many people use this, but the camera calibration tool right at the bottom of the tabs is actually very, very useful. So what you can do is actually add more pink to the shadows or make them more green. So what I did, I made the shadows just a tiny bit more pink, to give it a bit more color. And here is literally like the hue saturation tab, but it changes it in a different way, and it looks pretty good. So what I did was I wanted to make the tones a bit more orange rather than purple for the sky. So if I move it up to about 9-10 and I increase the saturation, you can see that that color has just completely popped. It's a bit different to what I was doing with the saturation. It just makes the whole image a lot more saturated and really quite cool. I left the greens here because there was no greens. I just made the blue tones a tiny bit more aqua, and that actually just changes the sky a bit more to make it more red and a bit more saturated. So whip that down to about -21, up the saturation to about +34. Yep, so if we compare it to the one that actually got featured, you can tell that the sky is a lot more saturated than this one. So what you do, move back up to the vibrance and saturation tab, and just up it a bit more, up the vibrance a bit more, add a tiny bit more contrast, and voila, you are done. So yeah guys, that is the photo completely done. And what you can do now is you double click and you export it to wherever you want, put it on your phone and upload it to Instagram. Yeah, so that is basically the end of the video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I just want to let you guys know that I do have some presets available for sale, and they will be on my website very, very soon. But if you do want to buy it, follow me on Instagram, send me a DM, and we can discuss you know, a package or something like that. It's not completely official yet, but I will put some out on like a shop, and you guys can purchase them. Yeah, if you guys like this video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me any feedback you like, just, you know, constructive criticism. Constructive criticism. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day and your week. Laters.